Okay. Ah, something's working. That looks like it's working. So hopefully that is now working. I'm always rubbish at live streams because I always forget how to set it up and have it work every time. So hopefully this is working. I'm gonna look over there to my beautiful wife, Mila. She says, yes, it's working. Can you hear me all right? Cool. Hello guys. Hello girls. Welcome to the EDM Tips live stream, celebrating 200,000 freaking subscribers. Thank you very, very much indeed for supporting me and the rest of the team over the past 7 years. I thought it was 8 years, but I worked it out, it's actually 7 years. So Noxel says a bit laggy, bear with me, I'm trying to sort this out. Let's see if I can kind of tweak the settings a bit. Video bitrate, maybe 3000 kilobits per second would be better. Okay, so if it's laggy, I hate it when it's laggy, so annoying. Can you talk to me? The video is laggy. What about the audio? Audio is fine, but the video is laggy. I'm not sure what to do about that, guys. I'm gonna sort it out. But in the meantime, I've got some questions for the Q&A. I wanted to actually dig into music today as well, because, you know, what's the point in all this? It's to make music and to learn how to make better music and have fun, right? I mean, that's what we do. So I'm going to have a... Yeah, sounds perfect, but the video is lagging. Okay, guys, I'm going to do my best to try and sort this out. Please bear with me. I appreciate your time. Hopefully it's gonna get better. I have got a good internet connection here, so it should be working. Okay. Audio perfect, video laggy, go for it. Okay, so I'm going to start by going through some of these questions, and if you do have any questions, do put them in the chat, and my wonderful assistant and wife Mila is going to collate some of the best ones, but I have got some that were submitted into the form, so I'm going to start off with those. Yeah, and again, this is in celebration of 200,000 subscribers. It's incredible, really. I can't believe it. I'm over the moon. Cool. So first question was from and I do apologize if I'm absolutely butchering your name, but it's Abdul Rahman, I believe. Abdul Rahman asks, can you give your best tips or make a video on how to make remixes? And that's a really good question, actually. Something that comes up a fair amount in the Accelerator live streams, because we have people there entering remix competitions and whatnot. So I'm going to give my opinion on it, and this is just what I've found when making a remix is going to be important. So each track usually has a main vibe or a main hook. Okay, so you think of Praise You by Fatboy Slim, it's the piano riff, and then there's the Praise You Like I Should. So that's got two very distinctive parts to it. And the key is really to work out what the one most distinctive part of that track is. And then you can build a whole new track around that. Now, it's only a rule of thumb, because sometimes you'll have a remix that comes out and it kind of bears zero resemblance to the original and does well, but that's pretty rare. You know, that is a rare thing. That's probably like 1 in 100 big hit remixes. Usually it's just a vocal or an instrumental hook. So what I like to do is to bring that vocal stem into a blank DAW project and leave all the other stems alone. And I don't even want to hear the original in some instances, because I don't want it to influence what the vocal says to me. And then the first thing I'll do after that is work out some chords that work really well with that, and they're almost invariably different from the chords in the original. But that's nice, okay, because that's going to give you a slightly different, it's going to give you a different take, and then I build it from there. Now, my co-coach Nick is really good at remixes, and something that he and I both like is the fact that you can actually make a remix like have a different emotion. You could have the same lyrics and the same vocals, but if you were to have like minor chords, you could suddenly make the same words actually mean something a bit different. So you could have one of my favorite tunes by Quiver is Twist and Shout, one of my favorite all-time dance music records. But because of it's kind of done in a dark progressive style, it kind of sounds like he's obsessed with this person and they're twisting and shouting in his head. So you could have the lyrics twist and shout mean something light and light-hearted, or the way that you treat it could give those vocals a different meaning. So I absolutely love remixing for that reason. So they're my best tips for remixing. Cool, and we've got some other questions in there. I'll head over to the chat for this one. Is the video still laggy? Video is still laggy. Okay, I don't know what to do about that. I don't know why. I wish that there was... Virtual background, maybe? Sorry? Drop the virtual background? No, that shouldn't be the case. Yeah, I don't know why it's... the streaming audio. Okay, cool. I'm just seeing if I can make it better. Let's make that 160 then. Might make it worse. And then video, please turn off any outputs to change video settings. I can't be bothered, you know, whatever. Okay, cool. The only way that I can make it not laggy is to turn them off. So I'm going to try and turn off the video streams really quickly and see if that makes a difference. So give me a sec. You should still be able to hear me. I am still here. No, can't do it. Whatever. It's going to be laggy video. Okay, so one of the questions in the chat from Archie is any suggestions on types of work experience to get you into the music industry? Yeah, so it's, you know, the music industry is a broad industry. There are so many things that you can do in it. So the first thing I would do is work out ultimately, you know, what your dream thing is that you like to do. You know, do you want to be a DJ? Do you want to be a producer? Do you want to be a sound engineer? Do you want to kind of be behind the scenes? And once you've selected a goal, then at least it gives you a starting point. Now that goal might change over time, and this leads to one of the questions someone's asked me about producing an artist profile, which we'll get to very shortly. But as you go through life, your goals will naturally change. But what I think a mistake that I'm guilty of, and a mistake that a lot of people are guilty of, is that you think you need to know exactly what you want to do when you're 20 years old. But you don't really. You just kind of need to know what you're interested in. Because when you've kind of attained some sort of goal, you might realize, okay, that's not for me. But then other doors can open up that would never have opened had you not taken that first step down the corridor. I know that sounds a bit preachy, but I'm just going on my experience. So I'm not trying to tell anyone. Everyone else might be different from me, but this is just what I've found. Which leads me to, yeah, so if you decide at first what it is you want to be doing, then that's going to give you an idea about what you could be doing to get into the industry. So if you want to work as a producer, or you want to work as an engineer, then you can start ringing up some local music studios, maybe doing some intern work. If you can't get any paid work, maybe you need to do a course on music production, or find some way to prove that you're not going to be a hindrance to the people that you're trying to help. And really, that is the ultimate piece of advice I can give to anyone. Decide on whom you want to serve and then be useful to them. Because the music industry, and so many industries really, are just full of people saying, give me a job, help me out. But if you can figure out how you can help the person out, you will always find a way, and you will always find work ultimately if you just seek to serve other people. And I know it sounds a bit woo-woo and everything, but that is the one piece of advice that will put you in good stead. So for instance, if there's a music studio and you offer to just sit in the back, watch them working, and say, I will make the tea all day, I'll go out and get the lunch, all I want to do is sit in and watch you work, and then anything you need, just let me know, I'll just go and get it. That's the kind of thing. You basically want to make it as easy as possible for someone to say yes to you. And the way that you do that is just think, what does that person need? What are they struggling with? And how can I give it to them? And if you can do that, then, you know, if you make a remix for someone and you do an unofficial remix and you say, I've made this remix and it's genuinely good. You have to make sure it's genuinely good, otherwise you're not helping them. And then you can say, you can release it on your EP. You can even take credit for it. I don't even need my name to be displayed. Okay, you can do that and you can have all the proceeds from it. That's an example of when it's very difficult, if that's a good remix, for any producer to say no, you know. So, okay, I'm laboring my point here, but hopefully that helps. So I'm going to go to the second question in the sheet, which is from Judge, who's in our Accelerator program, who's making some really sick beats. And his question is, who's the most well-known artist that you've had the opportunity to work with? So I'd say it's singers, really, rather than other artists. So they might not be well-known to most people, but at the era when I was producing with them in the industry, they were fairly well-known. So there's a fantastically talented singer. I say talented, she's really skilled. She's been doing it for a long time, and her name is Catherine Ellis. She's had multiple hits in the charts. She sung with the Freemasons. She did the soundtrack to the Gravity film with Sandra Bullock. And she's been on multiple dance music records in the 90s and the 2000s. So I was lucky enough to work with her. And my story for that was, I just decided at some point, I was like, I'd love to work with this singer. And I just looked in Google. I was like, work with Catherine Ellis, because she was a singer whom I loved. And then I saw there was this remix competition and it was closing in 2 days, 2 or 3 days. And I was like, oh, this is my opportunity. I was like, the stars have aligned, this is my opportunity. And I'd already been producing for a number of years, so I knew that I could pull it out the bag if I needed to. So then I just committed to winning that competition. And my skills increased in that 2-day period a lot. And the way that they really improved was using reference tracks. Now, you may have heard me bang on about these a lot, but it was when I committed to really taking, not stopping until my music sounded as good and as big as that track that I was referencing, that things really started to click into place, because then it just forced me to keep working. I don't even know if I slept for those 2 days. I was just like, doesn't sound good enough yet, doesn't sound good enough yet, doesn't sound good enough yet, and just figured it out. And then I won the competition, worked with Catherine several times, got my first manager. Again, he's worked with Axwell, the Swedish House Mafia, Bob Sinclair. So again, it's more the people that they've worked with that you would have heard of. But yeah, they're probably the two of the biggest. And now making a couple of videos with James Wiltshire from the Freemasons, again, a producer who had his heyday a few years ago, but now he runs F9 Audio. Phenomenal producer, fantastically excellent person. So yeah, that's that. Cool question. But let's go over to the live chat, see what I want. We have got, what question shall I do next? Mila, if you can collate, I'll just kind of go up and see. Sorry if I'm missing any of them, but Mila's going to collate some of them into a message. Cool. Thank you all very much for the congratulations as well, for hitting the 200,000. Really, really appreciate that. And hopefully the laggy video isn't too unbearable. Okay. Questions. Would you ever consider another DAW? No, I wouldn't at the moment, unless something really just comes along that blows my mind. I produced in Logic exclusively for a couple of years. I produced in Propellerhead's Reason exclusively for 10 years, and I loved that. And it was a simple thing that made me change from Propellerhead's Reason, and actually it was James Wiltshire at a conference. That's another great way to get into the industry. Go to conferences, go and meet people. There's nothing that will substitute meeting people. If you make the effort and you go to the Brighton Music Conference or Amsterdam Music Conference and you meet people and you make a good impression, that is 100 times more impactful than messaging them on the internet. So that's, you know, go to music conferences, get amongst it, take part in the industry, and things will start to happen. And you don't know, in what happened with me, I went to a conference and then 3 years later I was speaking at that conference, and then I was producing for that label, for Applique Records, and I was their go-to mastering engineer, and that came from going to a conference. That is just the best thing to do, in my opinion. In fact, no, I'm fed up with this false modesty. It's the best thing to do. You should do it if you want to get into the industry. Cool. Brilliant. We got Graham here as well from Data Transmission. Hey, Graham. Thanks for joining me, man. Sweet. So, great advice. All business owners are looking for someone proactive. Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Next question is from Hussam. When you started making music, what goals did you put in front of you? Based on your experience, what should I do to start performing in nightclubs or parties, for example? Okay, so when I started, what goals did I put in front of me? I just fell in love with music. So I didn't really have a goal when I was 11. I heard Out of Space by The Prodigy coming down from my older brother's room. I ran upstairs and I was just like, what is this? And then he had an Amiga 500 with this software on it called Octamed. It was really basic. You had 4 channels, and I just wanted to, I loved that music so much, and I was learning classical piano at the time, which I wasn't really into. So I was kept doing like happy hardcore piano loops instead of practicing Mozart. And then I just kind of fell into it that way. It was just out of sheer passion. I didn't really have goals, you know, I was a kid. And then probably when I was about 16 and discovered girls, and I went to see my older brother at uni, and his housemate had a pair of Technics set up, and then we just played on those all night, and then I was like, okay, I'm getting a pair of decks now. So it happened that way, really. And after that I've just kind of set multiple goals that have been a lot shorter term. So for example, when I moved up to London to specifically to DJ. When I moved up there, I was procrastinating, and then one friend of mine, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, DJ. He said, right, we're going out now, we're going to go to these clubs, we're going to go in and you're going to speak to the promoters. And it was that push that just made me do it. And then I got my residency in London. I got a few other gigs as well around the East End of London. So sometimes just having a small goal that's tangible, that's not too overwhelming. Like if your goal is, I want to DJ around the world with David Guetta, and you've never DJ'd once, don't make, like you can have that dream, but you need a tangible goal that you can actually go out and do, you know. So if you want to start performing in nightclubs or parties, practice DJing first, Hussam. You know, make a few mixtapes until you can genuinely say, you know that you're going to be able to go into a party and actually rock that party. You know, just do that first would be my advice, and then just put on some house parties. That's what I did. You know, and then you will hone your skills. Farzin asks, hey Will, have you ever tried making music in a non-EDM genre like rock or jazz? And if so, how did you experience? Yeah, I used to be in a rock band. We actually did all right. We made a couple of albums, toured around some of the best spots in London, like Clapham Grand, the Garage in Islington, and a few other pubs that were well respected for live music. And then after a couple of years of that, I just said, I'm just going to focus on my DJing, and I left the band. But yeah, that's it really. It was kind of an electro rock band, a bit like, well, we had lots of influences. Depeche Mode, I like The Prodigy, The Killers was another influence. So it was a bit of a mishmash really. think they're still going actually. Cool. I'm going to see what we've got here on the chat. Cool. Hello, my name is Morton and I want to DJ with David Guetta. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So yeah, I would really try and focus. You know, if you definitely want to be a producer, don't get distracted with DJing unless you're doing it for fun. You know, the more focus you can do on your one skill, if you can focus on one genre as well, you will get there faster, guaranteed. This is the question that I wanted to touch upon earlier. Andrew says, you're very good at producing. Thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate that. No doubt about it, and this is not sarcasm. Question is, why don't you have hits and bangers filling the charts every year and making millions of dollars by the millions of people listening? So, there's a few reasons for that, and this is what comes down to your goals shifting through life. So what I was producing full time, 8 days a week, 8 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, and after about 6 months of that, it kind of was killing my passion for a couple of reasons. The first is because I was just doing it all day every day and it started to feel like a job, and the second is my creative decisions were based on having to pay the rent, and I didn't like what that was doing because it was kind of infecting my art a bit. So some people will absolutely love that. I, at that particular stage, didn't love it that much. I was loving DJing at the time, but it got to a stage where I was DJing every weekend, you know, twice a week at least, and there's a shelf life, for me at least, for getting home at 5 in the morning. You know, there's a shelf life for waking up hungover, and yes, people can be disciplined and they will just not drink, but I like a drink, okay, and I like DJing and having a couple of drinks. And then I met a couple of things happened. I moved away from London. I met my wife, my now wife, and it wasn't really compatible with what we wanted to build together. You know, being away multiple times a week, getting home. I did it a few times, and then the whole next day would be a write-off, and we only had a couple of days a week to spend with each other. So then my mind started shifting, and I was like, you know what, I like not getting home at 5 in the morning. I like my ears not progressively getting worse. I like not waking up hungover. I like it when drunk people don't come over to me and just go, have you got this, mate? So it was a culmination of these various things. And then I was DJing in Essen in Germany. So I've been paid to fly over there, which is the dream. It's the dream. Played the gig, sat in the hotel room on my own after the gig, and I just thought, I'm depressed. I don't want to do this anymore. So it was a culmination of these different things. And now, you know, it's, as I said, it's a broad industry. So I've found something that I really enjoy, which is I can flex my creative muscles and make music each week. But I'm really enjoying helping other people make good music. You know, I'm seeing my students achieve things that I never achieved, and I love to be even just a small part of that success. I find it immensely gratifying, and I can be at home for a large degree and live a relatively normal life. You know, I'm into my fitness. I like being able to get up and go to the gym and all of that stuff, and yeah, that's why basically. But sometimes I miss DJing, you know, and I do a couple of gigs a year, and I love it when I do. So let's see what we got going on the chat. Reason to Ableton, what made you change over? That is from Frank You A Lot. So a couple of things. One was James Wiltshire, whom I mentioned earlier, said to me at a conference after listening to my music, he said, at some point you're going to have to start using third-party plugins. And at the time, Reason didn't allow for that. It just had the plugins that came within Reason, the stock plugins, which was kind of its beauty as well. And the second reason was something really small, really silly. I got a bigger monitor, and I couldn't scale the display on Reason. I don't know if even now they've made it scalable. I really hope they have. because if you're on a high resolution monitor and everything's really, really tiny, you have to strain, you know, it's like, oh. And then the fact that Ableton can just scale to whatever I want, even though it's not as pretty as Reason, and I love the way that you can flip the rack and change the routing. It's small things, seemingly small things like that, so that's why I changed. And then Logic, again, a seemingly small thing. The undo didn't undo the mixer controls, it just undid the arrangement window, and that was annoying. If I changed the mixer and I wanted to undo it, I couldn't. And it would crash a lot more as well. So there are the reasons, but there are the reasons. Cool. So let's go. Let's go to another question that was submitted. So we've got Mohammed here. Oh no, first we've got Diego. What's the best way for a songwriter or producer to promote his songs or productions mainly for chill EDM genres? Ooh, I would say just find out what's going on in the chill EDM genre, which labels are popping, which artists are big, which playlists on Spotify are big, and just start getting a feel of the land, a lay of the land. You know, think of it like like a campaign, like a war campaign. You want to get a feel for what's going on, because I think a lot of people just think, I want this and it should happen immediately. But like any game that you're playing, you need to understand the rules of the game, who the players in the game are, and this is true of any industry, you know. And it was only when I really accepted that, and that was only when I decided I want to be an actual music producer. A lot of people think this is my art and I should get paid for it, but that's rubbish. You shouldn't. You get paid for providing value to people. That's what that's it. So if you make really, really good music, yes, it's more likely to provide value to people. But if you don't tell people about that, aka marketing, then how will anyone know? So you have to be proactive. You have to get your music first and foremost as good as it possibly can be. Then send it to the right people. I know lots of label owners where people will send their music to them and it could be good music, but it's not right for the label, and it annoys the label owners because it's like, why are you sending me this? You know, it's like going into a vegan restaurant and asking for a steak. It's like, you wouldn't do that. So don't go to a hard house record label and send them Chill Out. You know, that's an extreme example, but you get what I'm saying. Cool. So yeah, that's what I would do. Get a feel for the industry, find out whom to send it to, make sure it's good enough, and start there. Mohammed asks, is there a basic starter template which you can share which contains some EQ, compression, return channels, etc. that people who are just getting started out on their musical journey can use? Yes, kind of. I do have a template, but it's very basic because there is no one size fits all. So depending on what you're putting into the project, whether you're using EQ or compression and in what order, is going to depend on what you're trying to achieve and what sounds you're going in. You know, that it's like asking, have you got a like a basic starter setting for an oven? Well, it depends what you're cooking and it depends what you want the end result to be. So not really, but I'm sure you can find some on my website that has got this like room reverb setup, a hall reverb setup, a mono switch on the master channel so you can check things in mono, a sidechain trigger channel setup, and that's about it, honestly. You know, I don't have that many more things set up, as I said, because it depends on what you're putting into it, the project, and what you want to get out of it. Cool. Okay, so next question is from Samuel. Says, have you ever used FL Studio? I haven't. And will you do a Teho style techno vid? I've never actually heard of Teho or Teho, so I'll have to check them out. If you can put a link to his or her best track or their best track, in the chat, then I'll check it out. Lost Sense, please do how to make progressive style house in the style of Martin Garrix. Martin Garrix, for example, Hurricane, High on Life. How old is that Garrix Hurricane? Oh, okay, it's new, 2023. All right, I'll check it out. I like to try and do things relatively up to date because there's a bigger audience. Again, I'm serving an audience. Okay, so yes, I love what I do and I'm being creative, but you have to pick whom you want to serve and then work out what they want and then use what you're good at and love doing to give them what they want. You know, that's the sweet spot right there. John asks, hi Will, why is EQ so brutal no matter what I do? Whether it's scooping, boosting, low bass, high pass, mid-side processing, everything still sounds rubbish. The chances are, John, it's because you haven't got the right sounds. So it's very hard to kind of EQ the wrong sounds to sound good together. So I would just, you know, you could give yourself the limitation. Like creativity hates limitless options, okay, but it loves limits. So if you can just say, okay, I'm not allowed to use an EQ, the only thing I would do is maybe EQ out the low end of things under maybe 120 hertz that aren't the kick and the bass, just as a rule of thumb, and just say to yourself, that's the only EQing I can do. And then you will be forced to find sounds that work well together before doing any kind of EQ. I honestly would suggest that as a very worthy practice, because when I started out with Octamed, there were no EQs in there. You just could put samples in, so you had to make sure the samples sounded good together. There were no effects processing whatsoever. So it's a good exercise to try. Let's go over to the chat. So Mackie says, I'm already struggling a bit with hearing damage from DJing every weekend and making music all week. How are your ears holding up and what are your top tips for keeping your ears healthy? Now I got some fairly expensive earplugs, the ones that just make it quieter without muffling it, specifically for DJing. I think they were by a company called ACS, I believe, but you can find them and they're probably a lot cheaper now, where they take a mold of your ear and then they create the earplug and you can put it in. But what I would always find I'd end up doing is just taking them out whilst DJing, which is bad, you know. So I maintain my ears by not going to loud gigs mostly now. But in terms of producing, I mostly produce at fairly low volumes. And then every now and again, I'll check it a bit louder to make sure it's still working well. But it's something you have to be disciplined with, because we all know how it goes. You start pumping up the volume because it sounds better. So you have to you could probably have a sound meter like set up in front of your monitor that you could set to go red when it goes up above a certain decibel level, and then that will just kind of remind you, oh, it's getting a bit loud, I'll turn down the monitoring. I haven't done that. It just came to me as a potentially good idea. Cool. Okay, so DJ Rubos says, congratulations, Will, thanks. Do I need your written permission to use your free kicks? No, absolutely, just use them, fill your boots. Same with all of the files I give out to download. Be aware though that a lot of people are using these projects as starter files. So if you're releasing a track and it's very heavily based on what I've produced and given away, it's happened a few times that several people will release a similar track because it's based on what I wrote. So just be aware of that. But yeah, feel free to do what you like with them. Cool. So then we've got a question from Hong. Cool. How can I use EQ to cut off the really unnecessary frequency of the bad sound? I cannot really hear by my ear, and even I watched the tutorial, I still do not really understand. So again, just as a rule of thumb, I would suggest just cutting off everything under, say, 100 hertz, maybe 120 hertz on everything that isn't the kick, the bass, and anything else that you need that low end in, like maybe tom drums, and then just use that as a rule. That's the only EQing you can do, and then you're going to pick better sounds that work together. And you can limit, just try not to layer too many sounds together as well. So instead of layering 3 or 4 claps, just keep looking for a clap until you find one that really does a good job, and then it's going to make EQing way easier. Okay, question from Mike. It says, congratulations on achieving 200,000 streams. Well, it's 200,000 subscribers. I think we've had, I don't know, almost 20 million views on the YouTube channel, but thank you very much. And he asks, looking back over your decades of experience in the music industry, what's the number one moment that advanced your career as a music producer? So there's no real number one moment. There are just particular points that stick out. But really, it was a lot of work, a lot of practice, and not giving up is the real engine behind it. You know, and people want to get shortcuts, and yes, there are. You can make that journey much quicker by getting regular feedback from people who know what they're talking about, from being shown techniques as I do on my channel. Of course, you can make that a shorter journey, but there's no getting around the fact you have to get your reps in. Okay, so you've got Peggy Goo, who's really blown up this year, but she had written 500 tracks before she had one that blew up. Okay, there's no getting around. It's like, if you want to be strong, you can watch as many like weightlifting tips as you want on the internet, and you can get a personal trainer who can help you do the right technique and perhaps dial in a good regime. But you have to go in and lift those weights. There's no way that you can't do that if you want to have that result. And it's the same with music production. It really is just continually putting the work in, getting feedback on what you're doing wrong so you can hone what your next rep will be, and then do it again. So you have to do that. But there are a few things that stood out for me. One was winning that Catherine Ellis remix competition. The second was winning a Future Music remix competition, which opened up a lot of other doors and won me about £10,000 worth of really nice equipment. Working with big people whom I really respected, or still respect rather. Interviewing James, another highlight for me. Many highlights. DJing at the Ministry of Sound, that was another one. Coming third in the UK in Telegraph National DJ competition. So those are probably the highlights that stand out for me. But there are little personal goals as well, like getting my first dub plate pressed to vinyl. And I just remember the smell of this one-off pressed record, my first record pressed, that I travelled up to East London from the Isle of Wight specifically to do. Hiring my first recording studio when I was about 16 to record a singer. Just these little things just stick in my mind. But really, you just got to get the reps in, and then stuff happens and it looks like, oh, this event just happened, but it didn't just happen. There was a wealth of effort behind it beforehand. Okay, cool. So next question is from Justin, who says, what's the status of world fusion? What would be the best way to integrate a strong interest in tango, Afro-Latin and or desert sounds into a mainstream targeted cover? Okay, so this is a great question, and this can lead to that all-important signature sound that you might be hunting for. And what I've seen, what I've heard, what I've analysed, and I've analysed thousands of tracks now. I've listened to tens of thousands of tracks in my life, God knows how many. But I've specifically analysed a lot. And I would say if you can get two styles and combine them, that's a difficult feat, and it's all you should be aiming for. Like Major Lazer combining EDM with dancehall. That's just an example that springs to mind. So just don't don't try and combine too many things, because what you'll end up doing is creating something that's nothing to anyone. Okay, it's like creating a meal with all the different spices in, all the different ingredients in. All you're going to do is just create this blancmange mess that doesn't speak to anyone, doesn't taste great. Better to just pick and combine two things. Okay, I'll use the chef analogy again. I'm going to combine a really well cooked steak, like the perfectly cooked T-bone steak, and I'm going to combine that with like a Thai dressing. Okay, so you've got two things, and you experiment and you can see if you can make it work, and you might need to tweak a couple of things. But what you don't want to do is go, I want a steak, I want a Thai dressing, I want an Indian sauce, and I want like a Hawaiian dressing on top of all of that, because all that's going to happen is you're going to create something really horrible and disgusting. So that would be my advice, just try and integrate two styles together. Yeah. Let's look on the live chat, see what's going on again. Sheriff asks, Will, what do you think of big record labels signing TikTok influencers? Influences or influencers? What do you think of TikTok making bad music popular? It's the free market, man. I mean, people will always dislike a lot of music, and that's a good thing. It means you've got your personal tastes. If a bunch of kids watching TikTok love some track that you think is rubbish, that's their prerogative, If you like that music, then fantastic. Maybe you can create something that they might want to have on their TikToks. So I'm predominantly a free marketeer. I like that people get to choose what they listen to, and everyone's got different tastes. Okay, I don't care if people don't like my channel. I know this is something that you have to realize as well. If you make music, most people in the world will hate your music, and that's fine. Okay, you don't need you need to love it, and you need a small audience of people who love it too, and that's it. Okay, you don't need everyone to love your music. So record labels need to make money. They're businesses, so if they're looking on TikTok to find tracks that are blowing up in popularity, depending on the label, if it's in their kind of MO to sign something like that, then they will. If it's someone like Anjuna Beats or Anjuna Deep, they're not going to do that, because it's not that's not what they do. They curate a very specific type of music for their audience, and they know their audience won't like that TikTok hit. So different labels for different audiences, and again, that's great. You can go out and you get Thai food, you can go out and you can get Indian food. It's lovely to have the choice, and you don't need to satisfy everyone. Cool. So I released, let's see, how do you do that vocal reverb at the beginning of verse? Chris asks, is the Accelerator program feasible for people with full-time jobs? Curious about how the live part is scheduled throughout the week. Yes, so I'll talk about that really quickly. It was designed specifically for people with jobs or studying full-time, basically people who have real life happening. And the irony is, I find that the people that make the most of it are the people who have full-time jobs or are studying. Like if you want something doing, give it to someone busy. And I don't know why this works like this, but if you want something to not get done, give it to someone with loads of spare time, and it won't get done. So the Accelerator is designed to take about 5 to 10 hours a week. Most people can fit that around a working schedule. Yes, you will have to make some sacrifices, but those sacrifices should be things like watching Game of Thrones or wasting time scrolling through Instagram. Okay, that is usually doable for most people unless they're insanely busy. In terms of the live group sessions, they happen twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. at the moment British Summer Time, which is 9 a.m. Pacific Summer Time. And even if you can't attend the live group sessions, you can still submit your questions. We will answer them. We will give you the examples. We will, so you might say, how does How does David Guetta get this bass sound sounding so big at this track at 3 minutes 33 seconds? And Nick or I will show the exact process from scratch and explain the thought process behind creating a sound like that. And if you're not on the live call, you can just watch it the next day, because we record them all. We timestamp it, so if you're super busy, you can just go to the bit where your question's answered. So that's how it works. Now in terms of the one-on-one calls, we just schedule them, you know, how it's going to work for your time. And that's a lot more tailored. But yeah, that's how it works. So hopefully that helps anyway, Chris. I'd say 95% of the people in the Accelerator have full-time jobs, or are studying full-time, or have a business or something that is taking up 8 hours a day of their life. Cool. Okay, so let's we have got thoughts on what is happening regarding AI. We will touch upon that very shortly, Jay. That's a great question. So I'm going to go to Oystein, and again, my apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, which I almost certainly am. I struggle with reverb. I have Ableton Suite, but so far get the best results from the free Valhalla Supermassive. What reverb plugins do you recommend? Well, the Ableton hybrid reverb is fantastic. To be honest, mostly I just use the normal Ableton reverb. It doesn't sound as good. I actually really like the Valhalla Room reverb. If I was going to suggest one reverb, that would be it. And then just learn how to get the results that you want from one reverb. If you have 6 reverb plugins, it's just going to confuse you. You do not need them. A lot of you won't believe me, so I'm going to repeat that. You just need one reverb plugin and learn how to get the most from it before you start. You know, the last 5% of being world class, yes, okay, there are benefits to having different reverbs for different things. But until you're at the stage where you think your music sounds really good, and you can compare it to your favorite music and think, yeah, my music does actually sound good now. You only need 1 or 2 reverbs, and just learn how to get the absolute most from them. That was the benefit of working in Reason, actually being forced to get the very best from relatively few plugins. You know, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making is just buying loads of new plugins, thinking that's what's going to make their music sound good, but just learning how to get the best of what you've got is what's going to make your music sound good. Cool. So Mark says, hey Will, not a question, it's a thank you. I started making music 6 years ago and booked 4 courses with you. Everything has brought me further. Music is just my hobby, and that's okay. Thank you so much. I'm really very glad that you've got benefit from my videos and my courses, and a lot of people who produce music are doing it just for a hobby, and that's absolutely 100% fine. You know, it's an absolute passion, and it's a joy to do music production. And if you're doing it just for the fame or the money and you don't love doing it, look, then you'll give up, because it's difficult. There's a lot to learn. But just because it's difficult and frustrating sometimes, it doesn't mean you should pack it in, because the satisfaction comes from the fact it's difficult. If it was easy, you wouldn't find it as satisfying, because we're humans and we're weird like that. Cool. Question from... Okay, no, that's just a chat on there comparing Diva and stuff. Yeah, Diva's a great synth. Cool. So Jay asked, thoughts on what's happening regarding AI? Now, I've got a big YouTuber buddy who teaches people how to make their voices sound good. So he's like a podcast expert. And he's kind of getting worried because AI is very good now at creating human voices, the spoken voice. Now, for music production, there are tools available, and I'm actually releasing a video that I've been working on in a couple of weeks on this. But my feeling is that this discussion is the same when people were talking about sampling. Oh, it doesn't take any skill, it's going to ruin music, yada yada yada. Then sample packs and loops. Oh, it's going to ruin music, blah blah blah. But I don't think, even as good as AI will get, people will still want to make music to express themselves. Now, what tools they use doesn't matter. You know, you could use a piano, or you could use an AI thing and say, program me a beat that sounds like Fisher, but tweak it up a bit and make it a bit more groovy. And then you'll listen to it, and then you'll probably say, switch out the hi-hat for a different hi-hat that's a little bit more splashy. I think that's what it's going to look like. I don't know when it's going to get that good, but it will at some point. And is that going to stop you making music? It's not going to stop me making music. I'll just use those tools, because your taste and your desire to express yourself musically is never going to be able to be taken over by a human. That's it, really. That's what I think. So next question is from Gary. Hi Will, when you start out making music, is it better to release songs consistently on SoundCloud and build a following, or is it better to keep your songs and send to labels once you're at a good enough standard, or would it be a bit of both? Well, I would not bother building a following, personally, my advice. I'm all about focus now. The older I get, the more limited I realise time is, and the more bang for my buck I want to get. And that is a product of focus, and maybe you don't actually get to be at that, have that realization until you've spent a lot of time trying different things. But for me, my advice would be, get good at producing music first. Don't worry about the profile, don't worry about building a following, until you get your music to a level where you are happy that it's as good as your favorite producers. It might take you 8 years to get there. If you join the Accelerator, it might take you 2 years to get there if you're just starting. If you've already been producing, it might take you 6 months or a year. But my point is, if that is the bottleneck. So you can build a following with mediocre music, and if you enjoy doing that and you like posting your tracks to SoundCloud and getting feedback and hearing how people are finding them get better and they make suggestions to you, go for it. You know, it's different for everyone. But if you want to, you know, become a famous music producer or a successful music producer and make a living from it, I would suggest just get good at music production, then start releasing music. Because if you're sending people to music that's not great, they won't share it. If you get your music great and then send people to it, they will start sharing it and it will start compounding. But again, that's not for everyone. That's what I would recommend. Cool. Okay, so Yar asks, hello Will, please let me know how many hours I should practice and learn music production. Although I would like to make it full time, I still need to work as a mechanical engineer for my living. Again, I would say, 10 hours a week is a good amount of time. If you're practicing something 10 hours a week, you will get better. If you're practicing something 2 hours a week, it's going to be a lot slower, If you can practice something 15 hours a week, yeah, that again, brilliant. If you are practicing 40 hours a week, unless you've got a specific curriculum you're following and coaching and guidance, my feeling is that you could just be spinning your wheels. That's a lot of time to spend each week. So I would say probably for most people 10 hours is a pretty sweet spot where you can make gains without getting sick of it. And depending on when you're starting, if you're in your first year, what you're doing in those 10 hours is going to be very different from what you're doing in your third year. So in the first 6 months, you want to just be knocking up loops. You want to be analyzing music. You want to be figuring out what compression is and how to use it. You want to be getting the lie of the land. In the second year, maybe you're just focusing on finishing music now. Okay, I can come up with loops. Now I need to discipline myself to finish a track to fruition. When I get sick of it, it doesn't matter. I've got my list of what needs improving. I'm going to do it until it's finished, until I'm happy that that track is a complete piece of work. Third year, maybe that's when you're like, okay, I can finish tracks. I know how to use everything. They sound professional. Now I'm going to start releasing regularly once a month, and I'm going to start building my profile. So whether you've got 10 or 15 hours a week, it's going to look different as depending on what level in your career that you are. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Yeah. Cool. So we've got Helix asks, what was the major platform you used to get your first foot on the step? Was it AR, A&R, or independently? It was remix competitions. I realized that there was a guarantee that the people that matter would listen to the music if I entered a remix competition. And they were less prevalent than they are now. So it was a matter of timing. So what you want to do is find the area where you can get your music heard by the people that matters. Your music has to be damn good. There's no getting around that. You can't send something half good and hope that suddenly they'll see that you're this beautiful flower that hasn't blossomed to fruition yet. You're not special. Your music is what counts. Okay, and if your music isn't good enough, your music isn't good enough. So the good news is you can make it good enough by practicing. So, okay, I think I made my point. You want it so that your music's good enough, and then you want to have it so there's relatively little competition, and you want to have it so you're almost guaranteed to have it listened to. That's the sweet spot of those three things. So whether that's finding a record label where perhaps a famous producer is released on that record label, but that record label isn't massively well known. If you can get released on that label, the competition is much smaller, but you're more likely to then be heard by the people on the big record label because they've already had some artists that have released on that smaller one. So that's what I mean. You want to kind of think creatively about how to maximize your chances and not be one of a billion fish all wanting the same thing. Okay, so yeah, it does take thought. You have to be creative. There's no one solution. The industry is always changing. Technology is always changing, so it's about catching. Yeah, just keep on trying things, keep on being creative, and that's an important part of it, creative marketing. Cool. Okay, so Will asks, what is your favorite genre and why? And also, considering the EDM culture today, what genre do you think has the brightest future? So my favorite genres, I reckon, they change, but I will always have a place for I'm going to say progressive house, but I don't mean it in the way that you probably think I mean it. I mean it in the way that it was originally, like Renaissance, John Digweed, Sasha. Nowadays, melodic house is probably the most similar to the old progressive house. So your Ben Bomers, your Lane 8s, melodic techno, I love that as well. So stuff that has emotion, but that isn't too cheesy. That, for me, is something that I always end up listening to. But I love other genres too. I love drum and bass, I love deep house, I love trance, I love most kinds of music. There is something that I love in it. I love chill out, down tempo stuff, absolutely. And in terms of what I think has the brightest future, there are so many subgenres of electronic music. So I would think more of audience rather than genre, because the audiences don't change. So the main audiences that I've determined you have the trance audience. These are the people that want to go reach for the lasers, have massive euphoric trance. Now the trance music changes as technology and trends come and go, but the audience of the people that want to reach their hands to the lasers, close their eyes and feel euphoric and dance at a fast tempo, that audience is there. Similarly, you've got the progressive house audience or the melodic house audience they're similar, but they want things to be a bit more groovy. Maybe they're a bit older than the trance audience, and that music changes, but the audience is there. And then the other type is like the house music audience. So you've got people that it's a bit funky, they go to the club, maybe they want to meet some girls. It's more about dancing with people, and that's tech house, that's house music more than the kind of more euphoric stuff. So if you can focus on an audience and then think, okay, what are they listening to at the moment and what can I bring that's fresh to the table, then I think you're going to be able to develop. You won't be married to a particular style when it goes out of fashion. You can adapt with the industry because you've got this core ethos, and that allows your music to change without selling out. So that's my advice on that. I think there's a big revival of an old school trancey sound at the moment. You've got Peggy Goo, you've got Calvin Harris doing it too, and that will always come around again and be revisited in a few years, I've got no doubt. Cool. Speed Racer asks in the live chat, I'm starting to produce synthwave. Any tips on matching the reference tracks when there are so many pads and synths going on? Yes, get the longest extended version of the track you can find, and then try and reference different bits when there are fewer bits going on in the track. So there will be sections of the track where loads of stuff's playing, there will be sections where it's just the kick and the bass, and then jump around the track, referencing it at specific points. That is the easiest way that you can do it. And then you can use filters as well. So if you want to focus on the low end, filter out the high end, focus on that. If you want to focus on the synths, filter out the low end so you don't have the kick and the bass. And all these little tips will help. You can also, if you've got it warped with Complex Pro, you can slow the whole project down, and it makes it easier to reference as well. JL says, I'm a 60-year-old geezer digging tech house. Is that wrong? Absolutely not. The only thing that's wrong is that you would stop digging it out of fear that it's wrong. That would be wrong. I love dance music. I love the ethos that it brings people together. It speaks to the soul. And no one can convince me otherwise. When people come at me with all these political arguments that were a hotbed over the last 5 or 6 years, I know the ethos of dance music. I saw the raves. I was a bit young for the raves. I've been to the clubs, and I know that dance music brings people together from all walks of life, and that's the beautiful thing about it. I've been to clubs where there's like an 80-year-old man in braces, like an old grandfather, just dancing on the dance floor to house music. I've been to parties, like we went to a club a few weeks ago, and there was a little girl in there who can't have been more than 6, and she stood there kind of looking a bit confused and bewildered, but she was dancing, and she didn't know why she was dancing, but she was dancing. And that's what I love about dance music. It's the essence. It's the essence. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Cool. Okay. Next question is from, depending on where he's from, Jorge or George. So your pink noise mixing technique helped me finally understand how mixing works in general. I learned that from you 5 years ago. Cool. Do you still recommend it as a method? That was by far the biggest eye-opener. That's really good to know, actually. Really interesting, because I don't actually really use it mixing. And for our Accelerator students, I tend not to. Now I've kind of worked out this top-down mixing approach where you get the kick at the peaking at -12 dB. You get the bass to sound good with the kick, and you just get those two things to sound good together. Then you bring in the main clap or snare, and you just make it so those things sound good together. Then you go for the main lead synth or the vocal, and you just need to make those 4 things sound really good together. And you already know those first 3 sound good together because you already did it. And that's what I call the top-down mixing approach. So that's the pink noise mixing technique is useful if you really get lost. It can help bring you back on track. But you've also got things like tonal balance now by Isotope, which is more accurate, a more accurate way of doing that. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Okay, from Ali, what's the difference between Ableton Live and Logic Pro? They're just different programs. I mean, it's all about workflow. They can both produce world-class music. Neither is better than the other. I would say that Ableton Live is better if you want to do some kind of live performance, but in terms of just flat out producing, both of them are equally good, as is FL Studio and any of the other ones really. James, questions. Do you have to perform live to get your track streamed in EDM genres? No. Do you think that mixing in different DAWs imparts a different sound to the final mix? Ableton, Pro Tools and Logic. I haven't noticed it, but I've heard people say it does. If you've noticed it, then it does. And then Sudeep asks, congratulations to 200,000 subs, sending love all the way from India. Thank you, Sudeep. I'm sending love all the way back. And his question is just wondering if we're going to see Max for Lives tutorials in the future. Oh, I haven't even really considered it. I kind of like to make my videos easily accessible for most people, and I actually don't really use Max for Live. I have it, but I don't really use anything in it. Maybe the LFO thing sometimes, but I mean, I could look into it, but I'm more about just getting results for people fast. That's all I care about. There's infinite things you can learn with music production, but the only thing that matters is getting music sounding good as quickly as possible with as few tools as necessary, in my opinion, because then it makes the whole process easier and quicker. Cool, so I'm gonna have to jump off soon, guys. I'm just looking at the chat again. Oh, I've got some questions that I think Mila's popped through. So I'm going to go through those and then I'm going to call it a day and have my dinner. So let's have a look through these questions. I'm going to kind of quick fire these ones. So Raul says, I've already answered that one. If my track is still occasionally clipping on the master bus after gain staging, should I be worried? I wouldn't be worried, but I would fix it. I would address that problem because it is a problem. So even if your mix sounds good and it's clipping, just bring down everything, all the faders, you know, in proportion to each other, so the balance isn't going to change. We Love Astro says, how can I make my bass house drops more aggressive? Layering would be my suggestion. So you can layer up 2 or 3 different basses. Just make sure that you're only using the frequencies you need from each bass. So having a white noise oscillator as one of the layers is going to add aggression to that bass as well. Using saturation and distortion to maybe the mid bass but not the sub bass, because you want to keep that clean, that will make it more aggressive as well. Try those tips. I guarantee you're going to get them sounding more aggressive. Stan says, hey legend. Thanks, Stan. Question, what's the best way to process drums on Minimal Tech House? Minimal Tech House. Probably less. You know, when it comes to processing drums, if you can just get drums that sound good together, you can just use the compression on the bus level. You don't need to compress each separate drum. That's probably going to kill the dynamics too much. That's what I would say. I would just focus on getting sounds that work really well together. Kaiser asks, will a label still sign your track after you have independently released it through a distributor? No. Gutham asks, how to work out the chord of an a cappella if we know the key? An a cappella wouldn't usually have a chord unless you're talking about the harmonies as well. And you could, if you've got Melodyne, like one of the more advanced versions, you could probably load it into that and it will tell you what the notes of the chord are. Other than that, I would just loop the a cappella on one chord and I would work out the notes, each note in the chord, until I've figured it out. And it's time consuming, but you will understand exactly what the chords are. That's what I would do. So Brian says serum, diva, vital or pigments, and I saw a discussion of this in the chat earlier, but yeah, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. I love serum and diva just because serum is very easy to teach in. really, and you can get great sounds out of it. But Vital will do the same job, and it's free. Diva I love just because it's got great presets. Pigments I haven't used much, but it's a fantastic synth as well. So I would really just pick 1 or 2 synths, and again, much like the Reverb plugins earlier, just learn how to get the most from them. ILD, is the only way to become a DJ by becoming a producer first? No, I know lots of people who are DJs first and then producers second. I did it the other way around. I was producing first, but usually people will become a DJ, or this is the way it used to work at least, and then they'll understand how music works. They'll know what will work well in their set, so then they start learning how to produce music so they can make something to play in their set. Jay, so now that you're famous, what are your plans for retirement? My plans for retirement? I have no plans for retirement. I don't plan on ever retiring, to be honest. I like doing stuff too much. So Casey says, would it be possible to do a video on how to create a chill wave or hyperpop genre track, maybe like Neon Indian, Toro y Moi, or for hyperpop Glide? I don't know. It depends how many people want it, because it takes such a long time and a lot of effort to make YouTube videos. If people aren't going to really watch it, unless I really just love the genre and I do it for passion, I need to have a good reason. It needs to be that I need to absolutely love it, or a lot of people need to want to watch it. So it's one of those two things. Now when they both coincide, that's the best. So I'll have to check out. But again, just if you give me some links to the tracks that you think are really good, I'll check them out. Red Pixel says, how much time to be good enough at music production to sign tracks in the biggest labels? Is the 10,000 hours theory right in your opinion? It's an easy soundbite, isn't it? Just saying 10,000 hours. I'm going to say yes, but I know you can do it quicker than that if you get the right training and you get feedback. Like, working something out for yourself is always going to take longer than someone showing you how to do it, but you still need to do the reps. So whether it's 10,000 hours or whether you could do it in 5,000 hours, it's hard to say. You know, how do you quantify that? Because all practice is not created equal. You could spend 10,000 hours in the gym, and yes, the chances are you're going to be a lot stronger than if you spend 0 hours in the gym. But all 10,000, not all 10,000 hours are created equal. That's what I'm trying to say. So you have to be doing the right things in the right order. But I would say from starting, what I've seen, starting from scratch, you can get to that level in 3 years. Starting from scratch, I've seen it multiple times. If you're doing it on your own, it might take you 7 or 8 years to get to that level. And I've actually seen it faster, but it's rare. I've seen it in like 18 months or a year from someone completely starting from scratch. But the chances are they've had some kind of musical experience. So it feels like they're starting from scratch, but maybe they learned a musical instrument when they were a kid. Maybe they grew up in a house where there was always music playing. So what people think is starting from scratch isn't necessarily starting from scratch. Will, do you think that at nearly 50, and I'm going to wrap up after I've gone through these, I'm going to quick fire them. So that's it, no more questions please, because we've still got a fair amount to go through. Mirko says, Will, do you think that at nearly 50, after not working in music production for more than 25 years, it's plausible to make it when much smarter and more up-to-date guys are doing fantastic things? Again, it depends on what your definition of make it is. If it's make music that gets released on the world's biggest labels and played by the world's biggest DJs, it doesn't matter how old you are. If it's jumping around on the stage and traveling to 50 gigs in a year, it's probably not so likely. But then, I mean, you could point out David Guetta, but he's got a huge experience behind him. So realistically, unless you're the one that bucks that trend, So, but again, it depends on what you can sound, what success means for you. If you don't do that, you will never know if you are a success. So you have to define what that means to you. Otherwise, you'll always be frustrated. And Alan from Embarrassed Arts asks, what are the next steps for EDM tips? I guess just kind of the main step is we're working on overhauling the Accelerator to include using more modern tools as well. We're always trying to make it the best possible program available in the world for electronic music producers. That is a big focus at the moment. That and YouTube videos. So we're in a coaching course at the moment for to get help with making better YouTube videos. Hopefully you'll start seeing the improvements, but these are the two main things we're focusing on. Obviously we're lucky to have a fantastic team. We've got Nick, we have Mila, Neil of course was a fantastic team member for several years. We've got Roger in the community, we've got Cody and Jason helping as coaches as well. We've got a fantastic video editor, so we've built a really solid team. It's taken a long time and I feel extremely thankful to the entire team for helping us get to this 200,000 subscribers milestone. So we are all working in the same direction to try and make the EDM Tips Accelerator always the best product that it can possibly be to help people get results, and the YouTube. So that's what we're working on. Anthony asks or says, hello, I released a lot of songs 2 years ago and that motivation, excitement went away, even though I love music production and make it in the field. What do you recommend I do to bring it back? Just choose a goal that's inspiring to you and listen to music that inspires you. That's how to get that motivation and excitement. What can happen when you start is, and this happens to everyone, I would say, is you're motivated and you're enthusiastic, and then you realize this is a lot more complex than I thought it was going to be. And then you get really disheartened because you realize that you're way away from where you need to be. Now at that point, the people that weren't that interested will give up, and that's fine. You know, they realize it's probably not for them because it's not just something they can pick up and do in one weekend. And then the other people can choose to then say, okay, I know my music sucks, but I know now that there is this mountain to climb, and at least I can see a pathway, and you need to see a pathway up that mountain. If you've got no support or you've got no clear path, it can be very overwhelming and daunting. So that's what I would do. I would think, plan a path forward. You know, even if that path is, I'm going to write and finish 6 tracks in the next 4 weeks. Okay? Then you don't need to worry about anything over and above what's in your control. You are the only thing that decides whether those tracks get finished. So you don't need to worry if they sound good or they get signed, because that's not the goal. The goal is to finish these 6 tracks. So if you can create goals that are entirely in your control and then work towards those goals and be honest with yourself when you're not working towards them, you will find that you will get better and you will be more motivated. So, would you recommend something like SoundCloud to grow a following or experiment? Yes, you can grow a SoundCloud with following, but be aware that then if you get your account deleted, as I did, you can lose tens of thousands of followers. So having an email list is a great way to actually keep hold of your contacts, because you own that email list. If SoundCloud goes bust tomorrow, if Twitter goes bust, then you can lose all the followers. So if you can get people on an email list, then at least you have that data. Rachel says, a record deal still relevant? They can be, yeah. Again, it depends what you want, but being released on a big label can open a lot of doors because they have a huge network. So yes, they absolutely are relevant. Patrick, how do you know when a track is finished? I struggle to want to make my tracks sound a little better and the process can go on endlessly? Yes, it can. So I compare the loudness levels, I compare the frequency spread with my reference tracks. If I'm hitting something that's very similar, I know it's ready for release. Deadlines will help me decide that as well, because if you have to release it, then it has to be done, and if it's not done, it's still being released like that. But yeah, it's something that you have to discipline yourself. It is a skill to say this tune is now finished. But what you can do is you can write a list of everything you need to do to that track, and then just do that list and then draw a line under it. So you can use that list, because you can't write an infinite list. If you listen to it, you won't hear infinite things. So listen to the track, write your list, it might be 30 things, and then complete that list, and when that list is done, that track's finished. Okay. Sergey says, do you have a musical theory education? I do. Not very extensive, but I did piano for several years. Got to maybe grade 4 or 5. I can't remember, it was a long time ago. Sheriff says, Will, what do you think of big record labels signing? Oh, we asked that. ILD asks, is there a future in uplifting trance? Yes, trance is one of those genres. That audience is staying there. The rock and roll audience is staying there. The house audience is staying there. They will always be there. People will always want something to dance to at 138 BPM and reach for the lasers. Chris, any big upcoming productions you're excited about? Yes, actually. I am working on a collaboration EP at the moment, and I am excited about it. It's really nice to work with such a skilled musician. So more info on that coming in the coming weeks. JD, tips on making awesome textures. Yeah, resampling, using reverb, using granular synthesis, using the crystallizer by Sound Toys, all of that stuff, and recording Foley, so getting recordings from real life, like crowds, rain, things like that can add real nuance and interesting texture. Hi Will, Paul says, do you have a favourite video you produce for YouTube? Oh, a couple of them. Yeah. Ones that I've really enjoyed the music, and I think the music is really good on them. I think one of the drum and bass ones, I really liked the Boris Brasher one was good. But there are several. There are lots when I really like the tracks. One of the yeah, and some of them I listen to. I need to finish this track. But yeah, probably the first trance one I did. And the track's called Horizons, and it's still a tune. I love it. Cool. So, covered that one from Jay. And Stein asked the same, but we've already talked about AI. Ronin asks, cool name, how do we know when our tracks are finished, composition, and we can go to mix and mastering? So what I like to do is take down the reference track that I'm using to -12 dB peak, because that accounts for the volume boost of mastering, at least to a degree. And then I want my track to sound, to have all the elements in that it needs. And then I'll go into mixing. But mixing and composition, these things are linked, you know. It would be untrue to say that they're not linked at all, but the differentiation I like to make is if I'm putting on an EQ and doing like a filter sweep, or I'm just taking out the low end in a big cut, I don't really class that as mixing. Mixing is the stuff that, you know, when you're really honing in the fine details after you're happy with everything, how everything sounds already. Some guy called Pete asks, what headphones do you use when mixing? I use these HD 650s by Sennheiser. But sometimes I'll swap out and use my HD 25s by Sennheiser just to see how it sounds on different headphones. Chris asks, how do you feel about iPad music production? I tried it when it first came out, and it didn't fit into my workflow, you know. And it's not that it's not great. And if you're doing live performance, I think it can be fantastic. But I've got my workflow and it works for me, and that's the only thing I care about, because production is what matters. And by that I mean getting stuff done. So whatever you enjoy that helps you get that done, use that. I don't care if you use a pair of castanets and a wet fish. You know, if that's what helps you make amazing music, then use that. Wash your hands afterwards though. Okay. DJ Vaz C says, Will, what is your favorite hardware synth? Oh, there are so many good synths out there. I don't know, I'm going to just go with the classic and say the Mini Moog, but there are loads of other ones which would be amazing, you know, like Jupiter, that would be another great one. Probably the 303, the Roland 303. I mean, I don't have a favourite, there are loads of good ones. And Johnny says, if your kick is -12, how loud should your bass be, or the clap? It depends. You know, I've tried to figure out like a go-to result for the bass, but the reason why I can't is because some basses have got lots of high frequencies, so they will be louder. They will show as louder quicker. So if you have a very like growly bass line, that won't be pushed up as loud as a subby bass line. So the way that I would work that out is to have a reference track. Once I've set my kick to -12 and my reference track is at -12, I roll off the top end of both my track and the reference track, and then I bring up my bass until it's got a similar energy from when I switch between the reference track and my track, and then you can check that on the spectrum analyzer and make sure that the shapes are pretty similar, and that's the best way I've found to balance the kick and the bass. So there you go, guys. Great, we're hit 90 minutes, which is a good amount, I think, for a live stream. So I'm going to send out an email tomorrow. Keep an eye out for it, because it's a special offer that I'm going to run just this weekend, and it's just because we've hit this 200,000. So August is a time when a lot of people slacken off and just relax. I appreciate the fact very much that you've taken the time to be here on a weekend in the summer. This is when you can get not a head start, but this is when you can make gains when other people are slacking off. So full respect for you for doing that. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, we'll be back with normal videos next week. Got some really good ones in the pipework, which I think you're going to love. And yeah, let's keep going onwards and upwards, guys. Let's hit 250,000 subscribers, and we'll have a big giveaway then as well, I'm sure. But just a quick one from Helix saying, wouldn't that be -18 LUFS on the ref, not -12 dB for like the kick? No, -12 dB. Yeah, -18 LUFS. Yes, you're right. And usually on a master track, that equates to -12 dB peak. Sometimes it's not. You're quite right. So yeah, match it to -18 LUFS. Nice one there, Helix. Got me out on that. Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of these questions right here really quickly. Rachel, you're also awesome support. Thanks for all the tips and tricks. Yeah, absolutely welcome. Who's your favorite DJ and who inspires you the most? Don't know. Too many good DJs. But yeah, thanks so much.